Anyway, welcome back to my channel, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing the original Halloween 2, the one that came out in 1981. I honestly didn't see the original Halloween films before I saw the Rob Zombie movies, so my expectations for the originals were kind of, I guess you could say, skewed because I've seen like the Rob Zombie films before, as well as like these newer versions, like the 2018 reboot, Kills and Ends. I actually kind of picked these up on a regular DVD at my local Dollar General, where I was just walking through the store. I believe it was around Valentine's Day, because there were all these Valentine's Day decorations, and underneath like this pile of like Valentine's Day red decor, I found this case that had a double feature of Halloween 2 and 3. So whoever decided to stick that under there, thank you, because this was only $5. And also thanks to whichever employee decided to just leave it there for possibly months. I already knew going in that it wasn't going to be as bloody or gory as the Rob Zombie films. I believe even in the production notes for this film, like if you go to the DVD menu of Halloween 2, you can look at the bonus features, and one of those features are these production notes of what of like the creator's thoughts on making this movie. And one of the things that popped out was, I believe it was Sorry, I nearly butchered his name. I believe it was John Carpenter or one of the producers who said that that since the release of the very first movie, there had been all these imitations and copycats, such as Friday the 13th, and they wanted, when they made their sequel, they wanted to make sure that like there was going to be a difference between like the gratuitous violence and blood and gore versus like actual suspense and terror. Like, because back during the first Halloween film, like it was nearly bloodless. The only scenes that I remember having blood in them were Judith's death at the very beginning, and also I think Annie Brackett. But even those, like, it was like a very little amount of blood. So it was interesting that they kept with that. They kept that aspect in the sequel, even though it did considerably get a little bit bloodier, which I'll get to that later. But to start off with, on what I really liked about this film was obviously all the characters and actors came back from the first film. I mean, the movie itself takes place literally on the same night. It's very similar to what Blumhouse did with the 40 Years Later reboot and Halloween Kills. Here, like, I kind of like it better here because like you actually this is gonna sound a little bit weird at first, but like you actually kind of care about the characters here. And what I mean by that is when I watched Halloween Kills and they brought back Tommy Doyle, Lindsay Wallace, Lee Brackett, and even that one nurse, Marion Chambers, like I didn't really care when like most of them died. I feel like what they were trying to do was the movie was trying to manipulate the audience that had seen like the previous films, such as like The Curse of Michael Myers and like 20 Years Later, and all those movies where Lindsay and Tommy came back, and they were hoping that the audience would actually care about these versions of the characters, even though they're completely different versions now. And I feel like other movies have done this kind of thing before too. Like the thing that I can think of off the top of my head is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where they brought back Patrick Stewart as Professor X, And in the same movie, they just killed him off. And they did the same thing with Halloween Kills. They killed off Sheriff Brackett. They killed off Tommy. They killed off the nurse, Marion Chambers. And, well, considering the fact that we haven't seen any of those characters since the first movie, since they decided to make the 40 Years Later reboot like a direct sequel to the original film, like, they basically did a clean slate with those characters, and I just didn't really care about them. But with Halloween 2, I kind of did, because unfortunately, like, you don't see Tommy or Lindsay at all in the second film, except for the opening scene that basically like rehashes the final few minutes of the first film. But Nurse Marion Chambers, like, she's the one who comes in and reveals to Dr. Loomis that Laurie is Michael's sister, right? I honestly think that if they kept Halloween 1 and 2 and then did the 40-year time jump, at least in my opinion, like, I probably would have cared more about the characters of, like, Marion Chambers and Sheriff Brackett. Because in the second film, like, that's when Sheriff Brackett finds out that his daughter is dead, and he has a little bit of a moment. Like, he's devastated after hearing about his daughter dying. I mean, I cared more about him than when I saw him in Halloween Kills. Jamie Lee Curtis, like, as always, does a great job as Laurie, even though she's confined to a hospital bed for the first hour of the film. All the other characters, aside from, like, her and Loomis, they're basically just cannon fodder. Although I do appreciate that they tried to give them a little bit of personality. Like, there was this one doctor named Bud who's basically just an asshole. But the nurse that he's in a relationship with, like, she does provide my favorite kill in the movie, like the one where Michael is just dunking her head in, like, the hot tub. Her skin starts peeling off. Like, that was great. And again, coming back to the whole blood and gore thing, like, there's not a lot of blood and gore in this movie, kind of like with the first one, but there are still some, like, gnarly kills where like a syringe is, like, hanging out of a guy's head. My second favorite kill in the movie is the one where, like, Michael like stabs a scalpel through that one nurse and lifts her up with one hand. That's pretty cool. The final fight between Michael, Laurie, and Loomis is great, where Laurie shoots him in the eyes and blinds him, and then that creates a distraction enough for Loomis to turn on all the oxygen in the room, and then, like, just basically blow up the hospital. Like, that was a pretty cool way to finish off the Boogeyman. Oh, one thing I forgot to say is, like, I love the camera shots and the lighting in this film. I mean, obviously, I'm always going to dislike the fact that there were POV shots of Michael Myers, because I've already given my explanation on that I don't like it when you're seeing through, like, the killer or the villain's eyes. So I'm setting that to the side. But all the other shots were, like, it's wide shots of showing a character, and then, like, Michael emerges from the background, which goes hand in hand with the lighting, where, like, it's relatively dark, and then all of a sudden Michael literally emerges from a dark corner. Like, I'm always gonna love those shots, and I wish that, like, a lot more horror movies, like, did stuff like that. Even that twist about Laurie being Michael's daughter, like, I didn't mind it. I think I heard from somewhere that John Carpenter, or a writer, like, got drunk one night and came up with that, and, like, I think it kind of works and it kind of makes sense. Like, Michael killed his older sister, so why wouldn't he kill his younger sister too? I just don't understand why Blumhouse hated that idea and why they scrapped it for the 40 years later timeline. Like, again, going back to what I said about how they could have kept Halloween 1 and 2 and then do the 40-year time jump. Like, I still think that would have been better. And, like, if they wanted to retcon that Laurie wasn't his sister, like, they could have said something. They could have said something, like, in the reboot of, like, oh, that was, like, a doctor or whoever just made that up on the file. They could have just kept the line that, that those kids were talking about how, like, that's just a rumor that they made up that was fueled by the doctors. There's only a couple things that I thought were, like, flaws in this film. Like, I'm not going to kid myself, there are a few flaws in this movie. One of them, and they're mostly minor, but one of them is how unhinged Loomis becomes in this film. Like, it didn't get as over the top as 4 and 5, at least from what I heard. I haven't seen those yet. But in this one, like, he basically goes on, like, a crazy rant to the cops, talking about how, like, he shot him in the heart 6 times, and, like, he's still on the loose, and the whole time he doesn't say, like, who he shot or anyone. And he's constantly referring to Michael as, like, he or whoever. Like, he doesn't really say, he's not really specific on who exactly he's talking about. And then, like, and then he kind of goes and tries to kill that one guy, Ben Tramer, who is doing all these movements that Michael wouldn't do. He's holding, like, this Halloween bag, and he's wearing a mask that does look a bit like Michael Myers, but it has blonde hair on it. And I don't know, I just thought that, like, that just made Loomis look stupid for a good chunk of the film. Like, it just made him look like a ranting, raving lunatic that personally I thought, the first thing I thought of was, like, who made this guy a psychiatrist? Because I'm pretty sure that if he was raving around like that back in the day, like, someone would take his license. And then the other thing that I didn't really... and then the other kind of thing, like, it's a really small, minor nitpick, but that scene that I talked about earlier where, like, Laurie shoots Michael in the eyes and blinds him, and he's, like, covering his face, and he's, like, swiping his arm around. To me, like, the sound effects for that just sounded so cartoonish, where it goes, like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And it actually took me out of the movie for a second. But again, that's just me. Other than that, the movie was great. It's really funny because, like, again, I saw Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, like, long before I saw Halloween 2 and Halloween 3, which I watched back to back. And honestly, after my viewing of Halloween 2, it honestly makes my experience with the 3 Blumhouse films even worse. If that was possible. I don't know, it's always great to go back to the classics, especially since I saw the first Halloween film in theaters, so I thought, like, might as well talk about the sequel and the third film. I mean, if you're a fan of the horror genre, like, to wrap this up, like, definitely see this film. It's a staple for, like, any horror fan or slasher fan. Like, even myself, who's like a fan of Michael Myers as a character, but really not a lot of his movies. This one was great to see, and, like, unlike the first film where I thought that it was gonna be all of Michael just slashing and stabbing, it tempered my expectations for this, and I thoroughly enjoyed this film. despite the flaws that I mentioned. But that's it for this review. I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts about this one. Next week, I'll be reviewing Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, and I had a lot of fun with this one. But that's it for this one.